Hey, everybody. How's it going tonight? Quick clip to start us off.
Hey, guys.
What's up, G?
Want to go to Chachki's? Get some coffee?
Oh, it's a little early.
I gotta get out of here. I think I'm gonna lose it.
Uh-oh. Sounds like somebody's got a case of the Mondays.
Classic.
Hey, guys.
What's up, G?
All right, enough of that. We don't need to see it twice, but it is great. Hey, welcome to A Case of the Mondays. And I'm seeing, if you allow me to troubleshoot here, this is the second KIRT, Kurt in real time. My name is Kurt, and we are in real time, except for my good friends on Instagram. So you're going to have to bear with me for a second because I think I know what the problem is. And I want them to be able to find us. So give me 1 second. As I shared on the, it's a little bit of a learning curve going on here. And so I don't have a professional producer going for me here and to take care of all the technical details. And people who know me well know that I'm so good with tiny details. That's sarcasm. So, but anyways, I just realized that I know what the issue is. And I think I know what it is, and I'm going to fix it right here. Now, let's see if this works. And it's not letting me do it. Oh my God. Oh, it's all good. Well, hey, if you're on Instagram or if you're on Instagram, you're not seeing this, and that's okay. Hopefully you're on YouTube. Let me do this really quick because I'm curious how many people do I have got going here with us tonight? It looks like we have one so far. What I'm going to do, if you're watching this, hang tight. We're going to be right back with this. I'm going to fix this problem because I really want these folks to be able to see this live stream. So give me 1 minute and we will be right back. We'll do a second take on this. There we go. Hey, everybody. Kurt again here, Kurt in real time. Welcome to our very first edition of A Case of the Mondays. And I apologize that Instagram people, you missed the clip at the very beginning. I played the clip from The Office Space, of course, one of my favorite comedies. Maybe it's yours as well. We've got a lot of things that we'd love to dive into tonight. And for those who are going to watch it recorded, we missed you. We hope that you come back the next time that we are live. The best way to do that is to subscribe on YouTube. You can follow me on Instagram as well, and you'll see all the reminders on there. But subscribe here on YouTube is probably the best way. Click on the little bell, add the notification. It's definitely the best way to stay on top of when we're going to be going live. But basically, it's easy. 3 times a week, Sunday at 11 for our Sunday Go To Meeting, where we talk about religion and politics. On Monday night, we pivot it, so religion and relationships. direction. Monday night, we pivot and we talk about politics and economics. Yay! And then Wednesday, we come back around for the Hump Day Nooner, a short live stream, no longer than 30 minutes because I'm not going to get in trouble with my work. So on my lunch break, you can join me for 30 minutes where we talk about sex and sexuality, as well as a dash of some of my highlights and lowlights from American pop culture, looking at film, music, all of that kind of stuff. The fun ways that we express our American values through the arts, and that might be saying it generously for some of those expressions. So, anyways, that's a little bit of what's going on with this new thing that I'm doing. A lot of this has to do, honestly, with some changes and some limitations in my own time that I'm going to go to more of a video-based format on YouTube. Most of you, if you've been following me or you're connected with me, you know that I launched a website a number of years ago. I mentioned this on the live stream yesterday, and I'm really pleased, proud of that. It's at last count has had about 30,000 various views of the articles I've published on there. Sometimes it takes a lot of time to write, edit, all that stuff, record the audio. So there's a podcast version, and I'm a pretty busy guy. And so I thought, you know what? Plus, I love being a little bit more personal, a little bit more impromptu. So I'm going to take it to YouTube, and that's why you're going to see more of me on YouTube. However, if you want to, I really want to encourage you to go back and check out a lot of that content that I put on the website. And I'm just going to show you the link right there. And you can always find that, of course, in the bio here on my YouTube channel, on Instagram. But there it is. You can look it up right now. Check it out. Please go and view the content on there. And I hope that it's encouraging to you. I've got a lot of good feedback. So make sure you check that out. Also, if you have thoughts or suggestions for content you'd like to discuss on those areas, religion, relationships internally with ourselves, kind of our own self-care and our own self-health instead of self-help, or relationship with other fellow humans, or relationships with other living animals and the environment. That's really the domain of Sunday. And then on Monday nights, if you want to get into social justice issues related to politics and economics, you might have some ideas, things that you'd like for me to discuss with all of you that we can dive in deeper. You can suggest that then, or sex and sexuality, or American pop culture for Wednesday, a little bit lighter. You can make those suggestions there. Or maybe you think of somebody, hey, Kurt, I think you should have this person on one of your Kurt in Real Time episodes, and I'll make sure to do that. The best way to do that is go to my website and just click on the suggestion box and complete that and send me your thoughts. So thanks for doing that. A little bit about today. So I wanted to pivot and talk about what we're going to look at today. So today's Labor Day here in the United States. If there are any friends of mine who are checking this out from beyond our borders, maybe north into Canada or wherever else in the world that you might be watching this, if you watch it or watch the recording, what are we going to look at tonight? So there's three things. First of all, with last week, of course, a lot of the big news in the political world was the Democratic National Convention. I want to talk briefly about that. I want to talk about the significance of $783.65. I teased this last night, or yesterday, I should say, during the daytime, about $783.65, and how. What would you do with $783.65? And that I can tell you, and I'm going to share with you a little bit, something that I'm not happy about this, because I've actually already spent this money on something, and I had no choice whatsoever about how this money was spent. And yet it was spent, or it was given to somebody who's spending it. And I'm not happy with what it's being spent on. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. We'll talk a little bit about this episode, or just to say this case of the Mondays when we talk about economics. I want to share a little bit about some of my passion for that subject, some of my background that might be relevant, so that I have some knowledge, some lived experience, we all do. We all do economics, but I'll share some of my unique experiences related to that and some of my thoughts. And then lastly, especially as it relates to Labor Day, and then I want to finish with remembering Emmett Till. And I'm going to finish and read some things to you and then close after I'm done reading those things to you as we remember the life, the tragically brief life of Emmett Till. So let's jump right in it. Jump right in it. That sounds weird. It's like we're jumping in shit or something like that, which maybe we are, because I do want to talk a little bit about where was it going? The Democratic National Convention. I was thinking about reminiscing about high school. My oldest daughter, Mel, is in high school, started her sophomore year. And my youngest daughter's elementary, getting ready to go into junior high. And I remember pep rallies. And I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I had the school that I attended, which, by the way, I had my 30th high school reunion a little over a year ago. It was so great reconnecting with a lot of those folks. Let's just say that one of the things that was, and I was in the pep band. You might recall if you watched yesterday's live stream, I mentioned I was quite the band geek. And so I was in everything, jazz band, wind ensemble, and the pep band. So I went to almost like all of the games. And I think it took me like 3 years in the pep band before we saw our football team actually win. But you would show up at the pep rallies and everybody would lose their mind. And if you were to listen to the rhetoric, it would sound like we had so much to celebrate. And that's basically my take on the Democratic National Convention last week. It reminded me of a high school pep rally. There's been a lot more brilliant takes on this from folks like I love the Daily Show, and their takes on it were brilliant. Make sure you go back and check those on YouTube. But it was trying so hard. It was trying so hard, and unfortunately, it was papering over some deeply painful realities for other people in this country, and then especially across the world. And so, I know that there was this surge of optimism, or at least portrayed on the stage. But I was really disappointed by the over the top antics to make it seem trendy and popular, really at the expense of overlooking those really tragic circumstances that, like I said, too many in our country and around the world are experiencing. So I'm going to share. A lot of people might be curious. They'll be like, okay, well, where are you leaning? What are you doing? Where's your vote? We're going to talk more about that as we get closer to the election. But I'll just be really candid. It's been an incredibly discouraging and kind of a scary time for many here in the United States. And I say that because and then we'll quickly transition to the fact that that's for people of Americans of privilege. But when we think of the consequences that our policies have on far too many of our own citizens, but especially those across the world, it's nothing to really even make light of. As much as I like to laugh about stuff, it's nothing to make light of, which is an interesting way to transition into this next thing that I wanted to talk about, which was, if you remember, the exact amount, $783.65. So what is the significance of that number? Well, I looked it up, and at least according to this is just an approximate, don't quote me on it, but approximately 13.3% of the federal budget, the U.S. federal budget, is spent on the Department of Defense. Is spent on the military and supporting other military activities that are funded through that budget item. And unfortunately, that includes the United States of America being really the largest distributor of violent weapons of warfare of any country in the world, as far as I know. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Somebody look up the stats, try to find that. Maybe it'd be really interesting to see if we can find somebody who could come on and speak to that with even greater expertise. But as a combat veteran who has come to a place where I deeply grieve my own participation in what I now see as largely capitalistic colonial exploits, or not exploits, really exploitation. I mean, it's really frustrating to know that number represents, that's my approximate calculation of how much I've paid in federal taxes for the Department of Defense just this year through, say, the month of August. $783.65. And I'm forced to contribute to a war machine that is leading to, particularly right now, one of the most grievous examples of that is the slaughter, the genocide of Palestinians through the American political entity, America's political leadership's complicity in supporting a rogue, violent, colonial apartheid nation state that we call Israel. And so as you think about that, I just want you, I mean, if you were to think about, I can think right now, $783.65. I don't know about you, but I could use $783.65. I could use it on a lot of things. I could use it on paying down credit card debt. I could use it on buying some practical things we need. Maybe something that I really enjoy, something I'd like to have, or something I'd like to have for our family. But instead, I was forced to spend that on supporting a military-industrial complex that is leading to one of the most worst genocides of our time. One. And we're not even talking about other examples. I know, as somebody who spent 10 years of my life working in refugee resettlement, working with folks who are displaced by war and violence from all over across the world, and as somebody who's been in a war zone, who's also visited refugee camps in Lebanon and seen just a snippet, just a glimpse into the painful challenges, the challenges of living a life day to day under those kind of abhorrent conditions. This makes my blood boil. It should make your blood boil too. Do you realize that as we recognize Labor Day, where we're all working, a lot of us are working, and as a result of that, contributing money to the U.S. federal government, you've been funding, and I've been funding, the mass murder of human beings all across the world. But namely right now, I'm thinking of specifically Palestinians. And I hope that in hearing those words, it will renew your commitment to stand on principle above any other issue. Because I'm sorry, as important as other issues are, there is a hierarchy of needs. And being allowed to exist is foundational. If that is not protected, then no other political issue even matters. No other political issue matters. If we either cannot commit to holding and valuing men, women, and children's lives and allowing them just simply to exist. And that's not what's happening right now. in Palestine as a result of the radical apartheid Israeli government's efforts to wipe out the Palestinian people with no other supporter greater than the United States of America. And if you watched all the news of late, it doesn't even matter which side of the political coin you're talking about. They're both green lighting it, both of them. So we have a lot to do. We have a lot to stand on and a lot to fight for, and to remember and to stand with the brave men, women, and children in Palestine today. $783.65 that I contributed, of which some of that is going to the mass murder of those people. A somber note. Let's talk a little bit about capitalism, shall we? Because I did want to go back, similar to like what I did yesterday. I think it's important, as I referenced yesterday. I forgot to mention his name, but it was because I'm stealing it from him. It was the great philosopher Aristotle who identified the three ways in which people are typically persuaded to believe and adhere and follow a way of belief and a lifestyle. And that's typically through the character of somebody, that they are they're people of true character, that they also have, and I should say as a part of that they have that doesn't mean that they're perfect. It just means that there's somebody who you can clearly tell is striving to be honest and compassionate and loving. And when you listen to somebody like that, eventually you will say like, okay, I think I want to take what they're saying seriously. But then that goes to the next two. That's ethos, according to Aristotle. But there's also pathos and logos. So passion and logic. So people want to know, if you're really passionate about this, it's amazing how much passion will will lead people to consider an idea or consider a course of action. But then also that they see their logic, that they see that somebody's using their mind, that they're connecting the dots, that they have facts and evidence that supports the argument that they're making. And, so a lot of that comes down to, it's like, hey, does the person that I'm listening to have a shred of knowledge or lived experience related to the topic? So what about economics? Well, I don't have a degree in economics. There are other people who are far more bright from an academic standpoint. What I have is the lived experience. It's really interesting having grown up in various environments. Growing up in a place of opulence, really one of the wealthiest counties in America. I grew up in Marin County, but it was a little bit interesting in that I grew up in Marin County, but my parents were group home managers for ladies with developmental disabilities. So they worked in the nonprofit world, which is where I work today, till this day. And in that, I can tell you, as if you're watching this and you work in the nonprofit sector, you know that we're among one of the most undercompensated workforces in America, even though we're doing largely some of the most important work to clean up the mess that is the result of a lot of our systemic injustice. People in social work, they're in the trenches, and yet there's some of the least, there's some of the most undercompensated people in America's workforce here as we talk on Labor Day. So it was interesting growing up in that environment where I was surrounded by so much wealth in Marin County, in the San Francisco Bay Area. But we would go to the food bank. We would get we were not living a life of opulence. And after my parents retired, the most they could afford was living in a low-income mobile home complex. And that's where they lived out the remainder of their lives. And they died relatively poor in America, going from Social Security check to Social Security check. and about the only benefit that they had from their career and work is that they had health insurance beyond not needing public health insurance. They had that from their previous employer. But other than that, they struggled. And so I experienced and saw hardship that way, but it wasn't even near as much as what I knew other people, or I was getting a glimpse of what other people were struggling around me. It was interesting because we would drive through San Rafael. This is over in the San Francisco Bay Area. We leave our house, drive through a part of San Rafael, and we see the day laborers, the undocumented migrants who were living in the shadows, working for far less, often far harsher conditions, to serve and provide goods and services to some of the wealthiest white elite Americans that you can find, those that live in Marin County. And I saw that struggle. I would eventually, I've seen certainly in my years of work with refugees, I saw the struggle of, I mean, we welcomed, when I was, say, for example, when I was directing at World Relief, we welcomed thousands of refugees into the Sacramento region I was directing at that time. And I got a chance to sit down with so many of them and walk through the financial challenges that they were having. And so I saw the struggle of their economics, the economic realities that they were born into. More recently, I've spent the last 5 or so years working in financial capacity building. So working with the International Rescue Committee for a period of time to launch a financial empowerment center to provide free financial coaching to low-income residents here in Sacramento. And then more recently, I'm now working with United Way, and I'm managing a guaranteed income program, again, for low-income residents in the city and county of Sacramento. And, you know, I'm just wondering, I'm looking at capitalism. I'm looking at the inherent commodification of human beings, ultimately reducing them to tools, more or less, in furthering the mass collection of wealth by a smaller and smaller elite group of people. And with that wealth coming great power that they then use to support a system that preserves and protects their wealth and their power. And people would hear somebody say that, and they'd be like, "Wow, Kurt, are you a socialist? Are you a communist? Are you a communist, Kurt?" Of course, when people say such things, what's interesting about that is it's really just a quick way to shut down the conversation. It's just, if you hurl out a pejorative word like that and label somebody, then it doesn't matter if the thoughts they're expressing or even just the questions that they're asking, that those matter. And yet, here's my thought. I'm just asking, can we imagine, just for a minute, when we talk about economic realities, can we just even imagine a different way of living? Can we imagine a different way of living? And I wrote down some thoughts here because I wanted to capture this. Can we imagine a different and better way for human beings to share this world and the resources we need to live relatively happy lives? And so I over this in future Case of the Mondays, when we talk about economics, this is really some of the things that are important to me. It's like, can we just be allowed? Can we create a space where we can just imagine something better than what we currently have for everybody? And it's interesting to me because this is Labor Day. So usually, I mean, you think Case of the Mondays, everybody would be just fresh off work. We'd be all grumpy and coming up here, showing up here on this live stream. You know, I don't, how would I say this? this is Labor Day, and we often forget. So I wanted to actually turn our attention back to Labor Day for a second. And it's really interesting because I read this about Labor Day, and this is classic. Let me read this. This is officially from the Department of Labor, and they have a website on Labor Day. Let me read this final summary to you that I thought was really fascinating. Their final reflection on Labor Day. Really, the history of Labor Day started with labor organizing or unionizing. But this is the final statement on it. It says, American labor has raised the nation's standard of living and contributed to the greatest production the world has ever known. And the labor movement has brought us closer to the realization of our traditional ideals of economic and political democracy. It is appropriate, therefore, that the nation pays tribute on Labor Day to the creator of so much of the nation's strength, freedom, and leadership, the American worker. So, kind of getting back to what I was sharing earlier on the Democratic National Convention, is just, again, how naive and why are we glorifying this so much? Why are we so obsessed with papering over the realities of most Americans? And yet on this Labor Day, I thought it would be good for us to reflect and just think for a few minutes. Think about your own realities, but I'm in a house. It looks pretty nice behind me. We have a nice dining room. We live in a modest 4-bedroom, 2-bath house here in Sacramento, built in the 60s. So an older home, but a nice home. And yet I know, especially from my engagement through my work or just the realities of living here in the city, that the standard of living, quote unquote, standard of living, it's not getting better. It's getting worse. And so the first task of leadership, as they always say, is to define reality, to describe reality. And that's the reality we live in on this Labor Day. And what are we actually going to do? Are we actually getting to the root causes of this inequity with our political leadership? I don't think we are. And I think most of the time we keep tinkering around the edges. And I know, as for somebody who spent a good length of my life working in social work, it's really discouraging to think about how we're just keep tweaking little things around the edges. We're not changing things fundamentally at its core. And that's something that we're going to look at here on the Case of the Mondays when we talk about economics. Can we imagine something different? So that I had to read that quote. It was too much. Well, I want to go ahead and start to hit the finish line. And for those who are watching, thank you for joining again. I just want to remind you, if you want to be reminded of when I go live, best way to do that is to subscribe on my YouTube channel, click on the bell, make sure you put on the notifications that you'll get notified when I go live. But remember, it's again, every Sunday at 11, Monday at 7, and then Wednesday at noon. And there's more of that on my Instagram if you're following on there. But I wanted to finish actually with reflecting and remembering Emmett Till. And this is going to be the way that we're going to close the podcast tonight, or the live stream tonight. I'm going to pull up an image of Emmett, and I want to read from a couple of articles. I'll drop a link to these articles in the chat. I was having some issues with dropping the links earlier in the chat, but I think it'll work after the live stream's over. So just so you know, be on the lookout. If you want to go back and read these articles, you can do it then. But let me share an image here of Emmett Till. I'm going to read just parts of two articles, and they're from. One is from the National Museum of African American History and Culture with the Smithsonian, an article called "Emmett Till's Death Inspired a Movement." And then the last one I want to read is some segments from our article on PBS, on an article called "Who Was Emmett Till?" So and then I'm just going to close. We'll close with just his image and some silence. And then I hope to see you again on Wednesday at noon. But let's focus now on Emmett. So here we go. This is from Emmett Till's Inspired a Movement from the National Museum of African American History and Culture. The alleged teasing of White Store clerk Carolyn Bryant by the 14-year-old African American Emmett Till led to his brutal murder at the hands of Bryant's husband Roy and his half-brother J.W. Millen, forcing the American public to grapple with the menace of violence in the Jim Crow South. According to court documents, Till, who was visiting family for the summer in Monee, Mississippi, I hope I'm pronouncing that correct, from Chicago, purchased 2 cents worth of bubble gum from the Bryant grocery store and said, "Bye, baby," over his shoulder to Carolyn Bryant as he exited the store. That night, Roy Bryant and J.W. Millen ran into Emmett's uncle's home where he was staying, dragged Till from his bed, beat him to the point of disfigurement, and shot him before tossing his body into the Tallahatchie River with a cotton gin fan attached with barbed wire laced to his neck to weigh him down. Bryant and Millen maintained their innocence and would eventually be acquitted of the murder by an all-white, all-male jury. They later sold their story for $4,000 to Look magazine, bragging about the murder as a form of Southern justice implemented to protect white womanhood. For African Americans, the murder of Till was evidence of the decades-old codes of violence exacted upon Black men and women for breaking the rules of white supremacy in the Deep South, particularly for Black males, who found themselves under constant threat of attack or death for sexual advances towards white women, mostly imagined. Till's murder reverberated a need for immediate change. By the way, Carolyn Bryant testified in court that Till had grabbed her by the hand, and after she pulled away, he followed her behind the counter, clasped her waist, and used vulgar language. She told her that he had been with a white woman before, but at age 82, some 60 years later, Bryant confessed to Duke University professor Timothy B. Tyson that she had lied about the entire event. Because this is what inspired. A boycott of the Bryant grocery caused its closure shortly after the trial, and the Bryants and Millen moved to Texas. Till's mother, Mammy Till Mobley, insisted on an open casket at his funeral services, which were attended by more than 50,000 people and chronicled by Jet magazine. The photo of Till with his mother earlier that year, alongside Jet's photo of his mutilated corpse, horrified the nation and became a catalyst for the burgeoning civil rights movement. 100 days after Till's murder, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white passenger on a Montgomery City bus and was arrested for violating Alabama's buses segregation laws. Reverend Jesse Jackson told Vanity Fair in 1988 that, quote, Rosa said she thought about going to the back of the bus, but then she thought about Emmett Till and she couldn't do it. And then finally, an excerpt from an article in The American Experience on PBS, The Murder of Emmett Till, Who Was Emmett Till? Says at the age of 5, Emmett was stricken with polio. He recovered, but was left with a slight stutter. Despite his childhood illness, he grew up a happy boy. Emmett pitched in with the chores. His mother recalled that he once told her, "If you can go out and make the money, I can take care of the house." This was welcome news for a woman raising a child alone. "It was just like I was carrying a load, and I laid it down," she said. Emmett, nicknamed Bobo, was surrounded by relatives and grandparents. He attended an all-black McCosh Elementary School not far from his home. Solidly middle-class neighborhood was on Chicago's South Side, where he grew up. Was a mecca in which Black-owned establishments thrived. Although blacks and whites were segregated, it was a fertile time for Black business. There were Black-owned and operated insurance companies, tailors, pharmacists, barbers, beauty salons, and nightclubs that regularly hosted performers like Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Dinah Washington, and Sarah Vaughan. Young Emmett's personality was infectious. He loved to tell jokes, said his cousin, Wheeler Parker. He would pay people to tell him jokes. In the summer of 1955, Emmett had just turned 14. He and his friends were enjoying the summer and dancing to a new music called rock and roll. One afternoon, Hurd was invited to Emmett's house for bologna sandwiches and Kool-Aid. They were all looking forward to returning to school together in the fall, where they would complete 8th grade and move on to high school. Hurd never knew that would be the last time he would see his friend alive. Then down below it says, in August 1955, Emmett's great uncle, Moses Wright, came up from Mississippi and paid the family a visit. On his way back, he was taking Emmett's cousin, Wheeler Parker, with him to spend time with relatives down south. When Emmett heard that, he wanted to go. But Emmett's mother had other plans. She wanted to take a vacation and drive to Omaha, Nebraska. Mammy hoped that by coaxing Emmett with an opportunity to learn to drive on the open road, he would opt to go with her instead. But for Emmett, news that his cousins would be spending the summer together in Mississippi was an opportunity he didn't want to pass up. The day before Emmett left, Mammy gave her sons Louis Till's signet ring, one of the few possessions she had from her former husband. The next day, Mammy raced her son to the train station. Their kiss goodbye would be the last time she would see her son alive.